Hey fam, it's JVL. I sat down with my buddy Chris Cillizza the other day and we talked a little bit about 2028 Republican nomination politics. And yeah, I know, it's early. It's way early. And also, Trump is probably going to run. But the most interesting part of this conversation is something that I think a lot of people are overlooking, which is that in order for JD Vance to get the brass ring, he gonna have to climb over Don Jr. I got a lot of thoughts about that. Stick with us, watch the show, and while you're here, do me a solid. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow us. It helps the channel more than you could possibly know. Here's the show.
I want to start with a piece that Jonathan wrote last week because it scratched two of my itches, which is Republican politics and professional wrestling. So, JVL, why don't you talk about JD Vance, for people who haven't read it, JD Vance, the Honky Tonk Man, and Hulk Hogan. I'll let you go there, and then I'll broaden it out. And I'll recommend people, if you have not read the whole piece, you need to. It is one of the it's a piece that has stuck with me and will continue to stick with me because it is a even in the category of JBL's general work, which I think is very high. I personally think it was one of the more insightful pieces I've read from him, and he's generally insightful. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, so you and our politics may not line up exactly, although I suspect we got like 90% overlap.
I think that's right.
Our life views are 100%.
100% line. And
Chris,
where we are in our lives.
Where we are in our lives, yes. The backgrounds we come up through with our cultural touchstones, our views of parenthood and sport. Like Chris and I are,
just wait
like
until we do our big denunciation of youth sports, how adults ruined youth sports. We're working on that. That's it. That's only a matter of time. That's our life's work. That's our coming. Iliad and our Odyssey.
That's coming. So we came up through the world. So my wife is calling me and I have to make it stop. We came up through the world of professional wrestling and WWF in the 80s. And one of the tertiary figures from this was a wrestler called the Honky Tonk Man. And the Honky Tonk Man was, let me back up. Nobody knows, unless you're deep into wrestling, you don't know who the Honky Tonk Man is. But
I mean, I do, but yes.
Sure, right. But everybody knows who Hulk Hogan was. And in the 1980s, Hulk Hogan was wrestling. He was Michael Jordan, he was Babe Ruth, he was all those things rolled up into one. And he took wrestling from a regional sideshow into a mainstream part of pop culture because of Hulk Hogan.
Made it what it has become. Without Hulk Hogan, even with Vince McMahon, without Hulk Hogan, it probably doesn't happen.
Right. And as a consequence, Hulk Hogan got to have a lot of say within the company. In part because they wanted to keep the big guy happy on the road. And he was wrestling on the road 360 days a year, and he liked to have his buddies around him. And so there were a lot of wrestlers who were great wrestlers at the time. And then there were a lot of wrestlers who were just buddies of Hulk. And so they got hired. One of them was this guy called the Honky Tonk Man. Now, the Honky Tonk Man's gimmick was he was like a bad Elvis impersonator.
Yep.
And Hulk and this guy went way back together. And Hulk said, "Oh, we got to hire him, brother. It's going to be great."
That's not a bad Hogan, actually.
Yeah, brother. And so the Honky Tonk gets hired and Hulk pushes him to the moon. And the idea is we're going to, WWE is going to push him. We're going to make him a baby face. So he is going to be one of the people that people cheer for. And he shows up. And from the very beginning, the audience rejects this character. This is a thing that happens in wrestling. Like the audience has a say. And the company can try to push something on the audience, but it only goes so far, right? And the audience gives a verdict, like thumbs up or thumbs down.
It's like Roman, for modern wrestling fans, it's the trials and travails of Roman Reigns as a face.
Yes. And so they fucking hated Honky Tonk.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what what Vince and Hulk did to try to put Honky Tonk over, it didn't work. And so eventually they launched a write-in campaign they said, we're asking the fans for a vote of confidence. And so they gave.
So weird that this happened. I did not remember this happened, by the way. Like your piece reminded me that it happened. I did not recall this.
Yeah. And so this is what people did before there was an internet, is they literally put on the screen, write in what you think. Should we let's stay with Honky or not? And WWE fans wrote in and said, we don't like him. Make him go away. And so WWE turned him into a heel. And so Honky Tonk became a bad guy. And that worked better. Mm-hmm. They liked the audiences were okay with him as a heel, but the truth is, even as a heel, he was very mid. He relied on what's called cheap heat, which is like the least imaginative way. He'd go into Michigan and be like, "What the hell talking about Ann Arbor? This is called Ann Poop," or something like
exactly. that. Exactly. It's like the greatest cheap heat is Rick Rude being like Rick Rude, who was like supposed to be really good looking, and he'd get up there and he'd be in Columbus, Ohio, and he'd be like, "Which one of your pig women want to come up here and be with a real man?" Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I did love Rick Rude, by the way.
And so eventually the audience turned even on this, and he got what's called nuclear heat, which is when in wrestling, when the crowd they're not rooting against you because they enjoy rooting against you. Right. They want you to be fired from the show. Like, wrestling fans view wrestling as a TV show. And when they decide with the character, they just don't want to see you anymore. That's death.
That's it.
Like that's it. And they didn't want to see Honky Tonk anymore. And so he left wrestling after a pretty brief stint. I think he was there for 5 years in total. And the short of this is that JD Vance is the Honky Tonk Man. And you look at this guy, and he's never been very good on his own. He has been pushed along by a series of people who he's ingratiated himself with, beginning with Amy Chua, the Tiger Mother, back at Yale. Yep. And he just sort of keeps, then he made friends with David Frum.
Yep.
Then he made friends with Teal. Yep. Then he made friends with Don Jr. And he got pushed to be like, oh, look in the company, he's a face. People didn't really buy it. And they don't like him. I don't think anybody likes JD Vance.
So you don't think the MAGA base likes JD Vance?
I don't think so.
Except by association. Like, right. And to just to extend the metaphor, you didn't do it. But if Hogan came out with the Honky Tonk Man, people would cheer because they like Hogan.
Right.
And so it's like, if Trump comes out with Vance, people would cheer because they like Trump. And the question is like, yeah, but if you subtract Hogan, nobody's cheering for the Honky Tonk Man. And your contention is if you subtract Trump, nobody's cheering for JD Vance.
I just don't think so. And I think that Vance has some real fans.
Thought. Yeah.
And Vance's real fan. I mean, there are people who are into him. But those people are like Rod Dreher. Right. And so like Vance's base.
They're not the rank and file of the MAGA conservative party.
Yeah. And so, like Rod Dreher and the editors of First Things and Compact Magazine, like these incredibly weird niche.
Yeah, hyper intellectual, trying to put an intellectual framework around Trumpism.
Right.
Sort of.
Those are the people who are those are just, devoted fans for JD Vance. And I just don't think that there is a viable base of popular support there. And so his whole view of 2028 is, I can only win by keeping anybody else from getting in the race. And so my theory of JD Vance is that his strategy is to convince the two most obvious people, Tucker Carlson and Don Jr., to not run for president by saying, we're best friends. I love you. You love me. We all want the same thing. You don't want to be president. You be president. They do that. It's all hard. People say
it's a pain in the ass. You don't want that.
I'll be president for you. And you'll just do your own thing, man, and it'll be great, right? And if he can execute that, then like maybe he could beat Ron DeSantis, right? I mean, he could beat some tomato can jobber,
right? Exactly.
But the people who would be the actual inheritors of the populist throne, I think his only chance of beating them is to convince them that they don't need to run because he's their guy.
I don't want to torture the metaphor because I love the Honky Tonk Man, JD Vance's Honky Tonk Man so much. So I don't want to be like, and who is this candidate as a wrestler? But I do want to talk about the rest of the field. And as a way to talk about, because I'm pretty sure, although you and I haven't talked about this lately, but I'm pretty sure you and I have a similar view of what 2028 looks like for Republicans. But let's because you mentioned these two, I do want to talk about Don Jr. and Tucker. I have not mentioned Tucker in my kind of top tier, but I always say, to me, Don Jr. feels like if JD Vance didn't exist and the vice presidential nominee was whoever, I'd be like, well, Don Jr. for sure. What is your read on people who are not part of that MAGA world? I mean, the number of eye rolls, gasps, surely not, that I get from people when I say Don Jr. And I say, like, I don't know. Have you ever been to a Trump rally? Have you ever seen who gets the most applause other than senior? It is not JD Vance. It is not fill in the blank surrogate. It is Don Jr. because he is kind of like, I don't know if you do Trump 2.0, the id of the Trump. I don't know how you could be more id than Donald Trump Sr. is, but the id of the Trump movement. Can you talk about how you see him? Because I think people do not take his chances seriously enough, particularly people not of the kind of MAGA movement.
I'll go this far. I will say that if Trump doesn't run himself, which I think is an absolute live possibility, and
let's talk about that in a minute.
I think are
let's
crazy.
Talk about that in a minute. Yes,
but if he were to choose not to run, I think the most likely reason for that would be because he's positioning Don Jr. to run. I think he thinks dynastically. Somebody in the comments just said, what about an outsider like Nikki Haley?
A true outsider. I want to talk about the Nikki Haley thing because I literally think it is, if you actually are not joking about Nikki Haley and it is such a misread of what the Republican Party is right now. But yes, he does absolutely believe in sort of the dynastic nature of it. He's very focused on legacy. He's very focused on being consequential. And to the extent he's loyal to anyone, which I do think is a somewhat debatable proposition, but to the extent he's loyal to anyone, it is like direct family members.
And for the most understandable reason, right? Because he's a narcissist and he views them simply as a pure proxy for himself. Right. Mm-hmm. He's like, yes, they are me. And, for somebody who's contemplating a world without you at the center of it, the closest you can get to being comfortable with that is like, yeah, okay, take my son who has the same name as me.
Right.
And I think that's the most likely place to go. And I think Don Jr. has a taste for this.
He absolutely has a taste for it. Did you see him in Qatar? The Qatar Economic Forum, where he's like, I mean, I'll admit I'm interested in it. Like, if I'm JD Vance, I'm like,
well, the only thing JD can do is hug him and convince him that he doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And the question is, like, is Don dumb enough to believe that? And I think that's an open question.
To believe that Vance will, hey, you don't really want to believe that line of argument.
Is he dumb enough to believe that he can get everything he wants without being president himself? Because that's what JD will say. It'll be just like your president.
Yep.
You'll get everything you want. I'll just have to get the title. I'll be the one who has to go to all the openings of the chicken marts and stuff.
I don't want to have to cut these ribbons and kiss these babies.
And that's bullshit. Like, you actually have to have the nuclear football to have the power. And Trump would not have fallen for that. But Don might. Don's not very smart
for that. Right. Too streetwise for that. Yeah.
I mean, Eric Trump would certainly fall for that. Right. And it's a question like, is Don as dumb as Eric, or is he smarter?
I think he's smarter. Yes.
Yeah, I do too.
And I actually think, and I know a lot of people probably watching this loathe Don Jr., but I actually, having seen him operate, he has a kind of like feel for it. Like, you can hate it. I mean, it's like for many years, Freddie Freeman was on the Braves. And as a Nats fan, I don't have the numbers on this, but I'm pretty sure Freddie Freeman hit about 850 against the Nats. I mean, the guy was going 3 for 4 with 2 home runs every single game. And I fucking hated Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman appears to be a wonderful human who I'm just a terrible person for hating. But at the same time, I recognize Freddie Freeman's immense abilities as a hitter, right? And I feel like with Don Jr., I always say to people, look, you don't have to like him, but like, I have seen him move around. He is not putting fingers Ron DeSantis. Like, he has a a feel, and you can say, well, he's a demagogue. Like, I get it. I'm just saying, in terms of what appeals to what the Republican Party is right now.
I mean,
he has a feel
let me
for
put it
it
this way.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way. In 2017, the operating assumption was that Ivanka would be the successor because she's smart and she knows how to get things done and she's not an idiot and all of this. And Don Jr. looked at her, and she's her dad's favorite, right? Don Jr. looked at her and looked at the way she was brought inside the administration and given an office in the West Wing and decided, I got to fucking knife her. How do I do it? I'm going to go on Fox, and I'm going to get good at going on Fox.
Rumble.
And he was right.
Yeah.
He was
all those
right.
things. Yep.
You know, like he went and he endeared himself to the MAGA faithful and the Republican base. And now Ivanka is gone. She's like, under witness protection somewhere. And Don is now his dad's favorite kid.
Let's before we go through some other people. Before we go through some other people, I do want to talk about this because I do actually think, I don't know that we disagree about the possibility, but maybe the likelihood of the possibility. Here's what people always say to me. Well, Donald Trump Sr. is going to run again. And I guess my view is constitutionally he can't. So the way that you overcome that is you either get a favorable Supreme Court ruling or you just get an unfavorable Supreme Court ruling and you just ignore it. Is it your belief that that latter thing, no matter what the Supreme Court does, he would just do it anyway? Because I think you believe it more like, I think it is a possibility. I think you think it is more likely than I do. Correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me how you get there, and then we'll talk about some other people.
All right. I think that Trump defying the Supreme Court is the least likely of the pathways to this.
Okay.
I think the most likely pathway is he says he's going to do it. He pushes ahead to do it. And he gets a bunch of primaries held in which he is voted for. And the Supreme Court is then asked to invalidate the will of Republican primary voters or to invent some new test like they did for the 14th Amendment. And that 5 people in the Supreme Court view the lesser evil as let the voters have their say. We'll just say it's 2 consecutive terms. That's what
which, by the way, the court does not like to, and has not for a long time, meddle in politics, getting away. I mean, they do that all the time.
Exactly.
So I have it. It's the campaign and then the court challenge, as opposed to the court challenge that gets the campaign. That's interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
I think if you are him, you have to create facts on the ground. And the other thing you'll do is you have to understand is by the time we get to that point, Republicans and the Republican Party will all be saying, oh, we want Trump. It won't be like there are 15 great Republicans out there saying, no, he's got to step aside because I'm running for president. If he has said I'm running for president, then everybody else in the Republican Party will have said, yes, sir. And so, like, what does that look like?
Tears in their eyes. Big guys.
Yes, tears in there. And so what does that look like when the Republican Party is saying, we want this guy, we don't even have any other candidates. How can the Supreme Court deny us this? And this is one of those things where if you forced me to, I could make a good argument for John Roberts to say to Amy Coney Barrett, hey, we got to grab Neil and we got to make a 5-4 decision on this because if we don't let him do this, it takes us to a civil war or something. Like I could see that in a way which I don't agree with, but which is not the most unreasonable thing in the world.
I always feel like this with like, how he pressures institutions. I think of this all the time. And because we are of the same cultural vein, I think you'll appreciate this. Do you remember in Spinal Tap where they release Smell the Glove, and the image, the cover image is a woman on all fours with a dog collar around her neck and a black glove being shoved in her face. And like the record promoter's like, you should have seen what they wanted to put on the cover. I feel like that feels kind of to me like the John Roberts argument, which is like, well, we can't have a civil war. You should see what he'd do if we ruled against him. It's the H.R. McMaster, the John Kelly, the whoever who's like, well, you should have seen what he wanted to do. And it's like, okay, but like at some point, I feel like that argument, I mean, this is that argument, at least in political terms, taken to the nth degree, right? Like, well, we're going to let him ignore the Constitution because the alternative is a civil war.
But we've already done that, right? I mean, this is why they created presidential immunity. So they created a writ of presidential immunity purely because they thought that the prospect of having Trump in jail while running for president was too dangerous.
Yeah.
And I disagree with that. But I mean, at some point, like, you're pot committed to that proposition as an institution, right? I mean, you've decided that you can't he'll die eventually. God will take care of this eventually.
Right. Yep.
And so if we give him this last term, this third term, he won't ask for a fourth term because he won't serve out his all. But I think a lot of this could be avoided by people understanding that Donald Trump is going to be like Castro. He's going to live till he's 1,000. Like, guys like that always live forever. They eat terribly, they never exercise, and they live until they're 92. But
the guy down the street from you who runs 17 marathons, I think that I remember, and you'll know this. When did you write that piece? It was a long time ago, but you wrote the Donald Trump is forever piece.
I believe I wrote that in October of 2020.
I think I think of that piece regularly. I mean, it's what we're talking about sort of here broadly. I think of that piece a lot. I would for people who don't, just search Donald Trump is forever in JVL's name. It'll come up. So we stipulate as we go forward that is at least a possibility.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about, I hear this all the time because people say, like, who's going to run? And I say, like, well, I mean, I think a fair number of people will run, but like, I think it's like JD Vance, Don Jr. Let's talk about Tucker briefly, but then I also want to talk about this thing of, like, what about Glenn Youngkin? What about Ron DeSantis? Can you talk? Let's talk first. Let's talk about Tucker briefly, because I feel like Tucker has kind of receded somewhat, and maybe purposely, from kind of the national conversation lately. But tell me why you think he belongs in that first conversation. Then I want to talk about all the other people we hear mentioned.
I mean, I'll say this about Tucker. In a world where Trump decides not to run, if Tucker Carlson decided that he wanted to be the Republican nominee for president, I think he would be. He is perfectly in line with where the Republican base is right now, and he is the best talker any of us have ever seen.
He's a great talker. I say this about Oberman. Oberman hates me. I think Oberman is a little much. That's being kind because we're live. But I don't have anything against him. But, like, my thing with Oberman is no matter what he feels about me, he's a genius on television. Like, if you go and watch what he did with Countdown or certainly SportsCenter, he's a genius. It's a certain skill, and he's remarkable at it. Tucker is a remarkably gifted communicator. He just is.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's unbelievably good.
Yep.
And I just think the base wants more of that. They want his type of authenticity. They don't want another politician. They do not want some governor. They
right.
They don't want some senator. And so I think with Tucker, the question would be, would he want to run? And he never has. No, I mean, this is something I've been old friends with Tucker for a long time. We do not break bread often. We haven't spoken in a long time. But I know for certain he has never wanted to run for president. He's never had that ambition at all. But if he were to change his mind, I think he would be impossible to stop.
I see some people in the comments saying, how can you say Tucker is authentic? Now, I actually agree with, this is the bow-tied, William F. Buckley, and now he's the Trumpian. Like, explain what you mean and why he is what you think the Republican base wants.
I mean, Tucker, authentic is such a weird verb because it doesn't mean exactly what the OED definition of it means, right? Donald Trump is very authentic, even though he's lying 90% of the time.
Yep.
But it's authentic, right? It's, it is what it is.
Comfortable in his own skin, says what he thinks. That's what people
Yeah, it's George Costanza, right? It's not a lie if you believe it.
100%.
And so long as you believe it when you're saying it, then you're not lying, right? That's the difference, I think, between authenticity and not authenticity. Is the people who understand that they're lying and are trying to sell something versus the people who genuinely believe what they're saying in the moment, every moment. And I think Tucker's a lot like that. Plus, again, like, Tucker's just I'm sorry. Like he is an unbelievably charming guy.
Totally agree. And I think people who've never met him probably don't. They're like, how can you? And I'm like, well, like I know him through mutual. I haven't talked to him in years either. And I'm sure you knew him better, but like I know him through mutual people. And like, yes, I mean, I would say, by the way, the few times I've met Donald Trump, he's like, people don't get this about him. Like, this is why the whole fake news thing makes me insane, because no one cares more about the media, and no one is more aware of the media, and no one is more solicitous of the media than Donald Trump. I mean, George W. Bush and Barack Obama were genuinely disdainful of the media. Like, they didn't really understand why there's a pain in their ass. And Trump, every time I've ever seen him, hey, you're doing great work. Now, of course, he's never read it. He doesn't know that I'm doing it, but that is who he is.
This is, and if I can just say to people in the comments, because I see you guys talking about this, there is a magic that people who are good at politics have, and it is like the Dungeons and Dragons character attribute category charisma, yes. And you don't have to like it or agree with it, and it doesn't always work. Look, I never understood the Bill Clinton charm, but like Bill Clinton was a charming motherfucker, right? Mm-hmm. And like it didn't work on me. I wasn't the target demo, but you can't deny that it exists, and Tucker has that.
And so. I totally agree. Let's talk, before we talk individual names. Do you, again, with the stipulation of, who knows what Donald Trump Sr. does, do you see any scenario where the next Republican nominee for president is not a full-fledged Trump acolyte?
No. Those people no longer have a spot in the party. And there will be no way to walk away from him.
There's no like, I agree with some of what he said, but not everything. Like, there won't be there's no subtlety that exists there.
And more than that, I think that 2024 was an object lesson to people who might think about starting a primary challenge or starting an exploratory committee even. This is one of the things you're going to see. We're going to pass the midterms, which is going to be when people start announcing their exploratory committees for office on the Democratic side. And the Republican side is going to be absolute silence. Nobody is going to dare put a toe over the line.
Because of Trump.
Because even saying it out loud, because this is, again, it is like a hostage situation where he keeps toying with the idea of 2028. And so until he specifically disavows it, then saying that you are going to set up an exploratory committee and go do an event in Iowa, that is an act of treason. And you have seen what happened to all of those people who ran in 2024. Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Chris, those guys are all roadkill. They're out of the party. I mean, DeSantis is still there, and I understand that, Ron DeSantis still thinks he's running for president, which is amazing to me.
He also probably thought his wife was going to be the governor of the state 3 months ago. And
I mean, he did.
And again, Donald Trump just totally power played that, 100%.
And they're going to look at this, and anybody who has half, 2 brain cells to rub together is going to look at this and say, no way, I'm not going to have what happened to me, or what happened to Mike Pence happen to me. I'm not going to have what happened to Ron DeSantis happen to me.
Let me pause. I agree with you. I just want to play devil's advocate for a minute. Let's say, so Trump is at like 42, 43% approval in the general electorate right now. He's over 80, certainly among Republicans, probably 85, 86%. Let's say he gets down, and I think you and I have talked about this publicly and privately before, which is his floor is probably pretty high in the same way that his ceiling in polling is probably pretty low. And so I don't think he's going to 29 like George W. Bush was. But let's say he gets into the mid 30s by the 20. They lose big in the midterms. They lose the House by 20 seats. They keep the Senate by a seat. He's at 36% approval. It's it's March 2027. His numbers among Republicans dip below 80%. Is there not a case to be made then that you can say, you could, as a candidate, say, I love what Donald Trump did, but we need something a little bit different? Or is it just, am I thinking in the old way of like polling matters?
Yeah, I think that's the old view. right? I mean, this is.
I think that as I was saying it, I was thinking it too, but I figured why not?
Regardless of how this turns out, the post-Trump move is going to be that real populism has never been tried, right? It's not going to be like, hey, we got to tack back to the center. Maybe we should try governing or democracy or something. Let's pretend the bottom falls out. We get a recession.
Mm-hmm.
Trump falls to 32% approval, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even there, the answer is not going to be Glenn Youngkin. It's going to be, we've been stabbed in the back by all of these deep state, blah, 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 blah. And what we have to do is we've got to do real populism.
Right. So even really further down that rabbit hole, not out of the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's where the party is. Because again, I mean, the dynamics are there because everybody who would have wanted like Glenn Youngkinism, they're gone. They're not in the party anymore. Right. So where's the appetite for that?
I know. Every time somebody mentions him, I'm like, the party is going to go from Donald Trump to a guy who made millions at Carlyle and whose signature thing is that he wears vests.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't feel like, yes, Glenn Youngkin, you know what? Among the dads who go to my kids' private school in Northern Virginia, they love Glenn Youngkin.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
And they're ostensibly Republicans, but that's not a thing. That's not scalable.
Do you think Glenn Youngkin believes in Glenn Youngkin? Because that's the thing that I've never been able to understand. For a guy who seems so smart, he does not seem to be realistic about the world in which he lives.
So because Carlisle is based in Northern Virginia, I know many people who work there and many people who used to work there. And for people who don't know, Carlisle is where Glenn Youngkin made all his money. And their view of Youngkin is he is a pretty good face for Carlisle. He's really good in a meeting where you're trying to recruit new business, but he's not the strategic mind behind Carlisle. Do you know what I mean? Like, he is not the guy. He is not David Rubenstein. You know what I mean? Right. He is not like the guy who made Carlisle, right? He's a guy who's like, he looks good. You know, he's good in front of shareholders.
He's good at lunch.
Blah, blah. Yeah. Exactly. And so, given that, I guess I see him through that lens more, which makes me think he probably does kind of believe in Glenn Youngkin because
guys like that always believe in themselves.
Yeah, he's just kind of like playing the role to which he was born. You know what I mean? Like, and so that makes me wonder: does he probably take some kind of? Does he think hard about it? Even though I agree with you. And so, by the way, just in that category, I would put Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, is a non-starter, right? Given that, right? Yeah. Nikki Haley is done in American Republican politics I mean, I don't see a way gets in, right?
Done.
I'm just going through all these other names. DeSantis, same thing. Okay, so let me just go through a few other people, just because selfishly, I just want to get your take on them. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Greg Abbott, 3-term governor of Texas. Probably more in his heart of hearts, more John Cornyn than Ken Paxton. I know that's a little bit of a deep cut if you don't follow politics all that closely, but more aligned with what the establishment used to be than kind of MAGA world. What do you make of him? And do Ted Cruz while you're at it, while we're in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if somebody was going to come out of Texas, it would be Paxton, because it's got to be somebody who went to jail, right? Or who almost went to jail. He didn't go to jail.
Went to jail. Texas is Trump.
And so if you're going to be a traditional politician, what has to be your strategic advantage has to be you are so far outside of the mainstream of traditional politics and what that
Paxton, right?
That everybody else is repelled by you because you're like, you are literally a crook, right? And
the
maybe
House
you can
Speaker, who is a Republican in Texas, tried to impeach Ken Paxton. Like that's what you need.
Yeah, that's my view.
Cruz?
Ted Cruz. I mean, at some point, Ted is going to. I think Ted has given up and reconciled himself to a life as a podcaster. But
that's what he was born for. Honestly, he's another. I always say to people, Ted Cruz is a good talker.
He's a pretty good talker. He does not appear to enjoy being in the Senate. He does not appear to enjoy his life. I just don't understand what that guy's doing. And so I assume
somebody
he
just said,
figured
I'll call an audible because somebody, I assume this was serious. If it wasn't, sorry, but somebody in the comments just said Chris Sununu.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is like, that's like the chances of Chris Cillizza being elected as the Republican nominee. I mean, I just don't, what
0.00% chance. Yeah.
Do any of the following names jump out at you in any way, shape, or form as interesting, whether in 2028 or beyond, as a future leader of the Republican Party? Stop me when you've heard one. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Tom Cotton and or Josh Hawley, Mike Pompeo, Tim Scott. Any of those people. Rubio is the name that gets the most run because clearly, even though he had like a very public fight with Trump during 2016, I guess nobody remembers anything about the past. He is now National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. Oh, Trump trusts him. What do you make of Rubio?
0.000% chance. Everybody's as much chance as, I mean, he's turned into a schlub. I don't know if you've noticed this, but like he's no longer like the dashing, good-looking guy. Not. He's now like sweaty with his hair receding, and he's just broken. He's a broken man.
I feel that sweaty and hair receding. I feel those vibes.
He is a broken man, and the base still hates him. They will hate him still.
See, that's the thing. It's like
because they know
Trump is able to forgive in some way if he thinks it's advantageous for him. But I really do think it is like you have to think about it like religion. Like, I do think the base will never forgive Rubio. Like, I just don't see it.
And see, that's what makes it easier for Trump to forgive, right? Trump can forgive because he knows his base won't. Right. It's easy to be graceful when you know that your people will hold the grudge for you. I'll tell you a name you didn't have. Candace Owens. You go out and talk to Republicans and ask them, like, hey, would you like to? I am telling you, in every single group, Sarah had this in 2024. So my partner Sarah Longwell does focus groups.
It is a great podcast.
So it's like 10 of them a week. And in 2024, every single Republican focus group she did, where she asked, like, who do you guys want? Overwhelmingly, they always wanted Trump. But there was in every group one or two people who said, boy, that Candace Owens is really impressive.
So is it your belief that if I gave you, if I had to split this into entertainment / right celebrities, whether that's TV, YouTube, or whatever, and I include Tucker, Candace Owens, those kind of people in there, or and I guess Don Jr. would be included in there too, although he has the right of heredity, but he's in that space too, versus literally any person who is a Republican currently in elected office. Would you choose the entertainer wing?
Yes. Yes.
It's so interesting. You think it's that we are that far down that road?
Yes. And I think that the chances of Democrats choosing somebody who is not in elected office are actually reasonably high as well. I just think we're headed as a country towards like full-blown celebrity idiocracy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, Democrats will nominate some like public servant who really prioritizes passing legislation. But I don't know, like Trump has been president for 5 months now, and they've passed 4 bills in Congress, I think.
And he signed 100 and whatever executive orders.
And, he threw us into the first negative quarter of growth in God knows how long. And his approval rating is only 42%. Like this is, I know like 42% isn't great, but that's actually, considering the facts on the ground, that's not bad. We're just in this gets to my general pessimism. This country is just fucked.